Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Venturis Stories, a podcast focused on navigating the art of product thinking. This is our second episode in season two, and as some of you know, we took the plunge into video podcasting. In the first episode, Arjun, my co-host, wasn't there, so this is really our first inaugural season two episode with both me and Arjun co-hosting, and we have Elizabeth Italiano as our guest. So today's topic is actually customer success, customer centricity, and how that relates to driving business value. To almost everyone, it may seem like customer success, customer centricity, of course, is key to business value. However, Arjun and I have seen far too many great tech ideas fail because they were not customer focused, customer centric. And that happens with a lot of startups. The answer, in our opinion, as our regular listeners would know, is product thinking, specifically, actually, the customer centricity lens of product thinking. In practice, actually, to drive this, it is not as easy as saying, okay, product manager, go ahead, get focused on the customer centricity and do this. It requires a village. It usually requires a cross-functional team alignment across the product and the go-to-market teams. So that's really where we would like to hone in today. And we are delighted to be joined by Elizabeth Italiano, who's the co-founder and managing partner at Go-to-Market Advisors, and very passionate about customer success. So Elizabeth, welcome to the show. And maybe we get started with your passion for customer success and a brief introduction about your career journey and our topic at hand, customer success, customer centricity, and how you see that tie into business value.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on your podcast and looking forward to this discussion. Product and customer centricity and customer success are something that I'm really passionate about, as you said. And a little bit of background of where I've come from and kind of how I got to where I am now, and the views that I have, which I'll share today. I've been in tech and SaaS for almost 2 decades now. And when I first got introduced to customer success, I was working at a startup called Radian 6. And Radian 6 got acquired by Salesforce. And so Salesforce was one of the first customers or companies that really embraced customer success. And I was asked to run a pilot project after the acquisition. And so the acquisition, we were looking at, okay, well, what markets are we going after with this new offering? And so I was asked to run this pilot project, and it was figuring out, is it worth building a team around this specific market? So the catch was I had to do both sales and CS. So I was a sales executive, an account executive at the time. I had never been in customer success. I had been an account manager previously, but that was the catch. They said, you have to do both. And I was like, okay, I'm up for a challenge. Let's do it. And it didn't take me long to really see customer success as being the true revenue generator, as being the profit center. Although it has typically been treated as a cost center, I was very quickly seeing, okay, this is where like the renewal money comes in, the
Mm-hmm.
expansion revenue, and really helping customers succeed is really where you start to get the economic benefit. And I became really passionate about it. And I still really love sales as well. And but customer success is really exciting to me. So fast forward, through a number of startups that I worked with, and I, had been in a few roles that after I left Salesforce, that I would help them stand up their sales and their customer success teams. Fast forward, a few years later, and I was really seeing customer success as being that economic driver. And so I started talking about customer success being a revenue center and a profit center. And so this now would have been about 5, 6 years ago. And I was getting a lot of side eye at the time, let me tell you. I was about 5 years too early with that messaging. It didn't go over well with a lot of people, particularly in customer success. I got a lot of pushback some not so nice responses.
Mhm.
So I pivoted my approach as I was, doing consulting at the time and started focusing on working with CEOs, CFOs, and CROs, VPs of sales. And they were like, oh, revenue, yes. How do I get more? Like, tell
Mhm.
me
Mhm.
more. And
Yep.
they went into it. And then the CS folks at the time, they were like NPS and customer delight. And yes, customer centricity is important, but NPS, that can't be the goal. It's,
Yep.
one
Mhm.
of the things. So anyway, as you can probably tell, I get really passionate about talking about customer success and revenue, and that's how I, eventually got to where I am today.
Elizabeth, while you were talking, I was just taking some notes, and I'll get into a little bit of detail on this. Customer success today, and I'll talk to the evolution of this. We had customer support, which was a cost center.
Hmm.
Customer advocacy, which is about 10 years ago, customer advocacy was a sales enabler. And now we have customer success, which, as you're pointing out, is a revenue generator. So surprisingly, support, advocacy, success is the evolution that we have seen so far. And you're absolutely right. Today, it's a revenue generator, which most business leaders have acknowledged and understood. And
Hmm.
before we dive into it, I'm just going to take a bit of a detour and inject some, of humor. I've seen some of your videos as well. You're a big fan of The Office, right? So, and how do you see the customer interactions, our work environment evolving to this kind of new normal, if you will? I used to be a
Hmm.
fan of Dilbert way back when, and you see the evolution of our stakeholders, how we engage with them. You talk about the CFOs and the GMs of the world. What's a good way to think about it? Hopefully, it's not efficient paper clips, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're certainly not selling paper, but I you would have seen some of the clips that we've included from The Office, and we include some of the Michael Scott and Dwight Schrute jokes. But the reason why is because sometimes I'll be completely frank. Sometimes Indu and I, who I've done some of those videos with, were uh, kind of feel like we're caught in the twilight zone.
Yep. Yep.
And
Sure.
we're ridiculous
Yeah.
as some of those clips from The Office, and that's meant to be satire and it's meant
Yep.
to be comic funny. And that last video that you may have seen, where it was Indu acting as the sales manager about like, oh, that messaging, that's marketing,
Yeah.
don't that. But that's what we hear. And then when it comes to customer success, and over the years, as we've heard, oh, no, customer success cannot touch revenue and all of
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
just, we have to have a sense of humor in what we do
Mhm.
sometimes, right? And so,
Yeah.
that's where we pulled that in. And I mean, it is, like I said, you have to use humor, but at the same time, it's no laughing matter when it comes to people's livelihoods and being
Mhm.
Sure.
successful. So we
Yeah.
take it very seriously. But I mean, I have a self-deprecating sense of humor, so I like to
Totally.
laugh. Yeah,
I totally get it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, that actually comes across. So, and on one of those videos, I think you were the one who was playing the Michael Scott mean boss, and I remember posting on LinkedIn that in real life, you're not as mean. So you did do a fairly good job of the self-deprecating humor. Now, switching topics a little bit, you recently posted about your running injury and your running journey, and you successfully refinishing a 5K and feeling good about it.
mhm.
And I'm a runner as well, so that really struck a chord. And I think you drew a parallel with that experience in terms of how, if you just treat the symptom versus the root cause, and you drew a parallel that sometimes if you are just fixing the symptom, you may not really be addressing the root cause. For example, maybe you never really achieved the product market fit in the first place and you're trying to drive a go to market motion. So wanted to just kind of touch upon that and hear your views.
Yeah. So what we see often, and one of the benefits of being a consultant and getting to work across a lot of companies, so dozens upon dozens, getting close to 100 now, if not at 100, is that you do see a pattern. And
Mhm.
one of the patterns that we see a lot is that leaders will think that, okay, this is where I'm feeling the pain, so this is my problem. And it's not really what's actually causing
Yep.
ultimate pain. So, resources get put on fixing that pain, but it doesn't solve anything. You
Yep.
might make a small incremental, short-term, fix, but really at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything. And so the product market fit is actually an interesting one because there's two things that I'm currently seeing. So there's one is, of course, there's some companies that have never really actually achieved product market fit, or they haven't defined it. So potential might be there, but they're like, oh, well, my product is for everyone. Everyone can use it. Anyone can use it. Well, that makes it a lot harder, to create messaging that's going to resonate. And not to mention, the cost of marketing and sales. If you're casting a wide net, but not really drawing in the people who you can close quickly, who you can keep as customers, then that becomes really expensive. And so if you never get to that, point of product market fit or defining it, you're starting behind the eight ball as it is. But then the other thing that I'm seeing is there are companies that are actually falling out of product market fit. And this actually came up in in the podcast between Jason Lemkin and Nick Mehta, is that companies are now falling out of product market fit. And an example is with the email changes that are coming up in February. So February 1st, Yahoo and Gmail are going to have email restrictions. I'm not going to name names, but there are companies that, as of February 1st, will fall out of product market fit. And I would hazard to guess, based on experience, that as sales slow, as customers churn, unfortunately, some won't identify what the true issue is.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I'm waiting for those changes, and I'm hoping that it doesn't negatively affect too many people, or people can kind of adjust to the new normal, if you will. But I've struggled, and to some extent, Gaurav and I have been through structural sales evolution multiple times in our life, from services to SaaS orientation, which is probably the last 5 to 7 years. The words like go-to-market, sales enablement, recurring revenue all kind of tie into this entire new normal of what we are seeing so far. This is happening and it's continuing to happen. So this evolution and even the examples you're quoting right now, how should customer service organizations, I mean, forget about the part that, the evolution of the organization itself, but how should they think about it? How do you work with product and sales organizations to create a better way forward? What would be top of mind, and certainly what are pitfalls to watch out for?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to, taking a step back and problem solving and diagnosing. And I think a great way to do that is through voice of the customer initiatives. So that's something that I've talked and posted a lot about because there's a lot of benefit to voice of the customer. You can do market research, and so that helps your top of funnel and marketing, and you can identify churn risks potentially in customer sentiment with your existing customer base. But then when you pull product into that, that can really help to define what the product roadmap should be going forward. And what the value of doing a true voice of the customer initiative is that you don't, just talk to your happy customers, talk to your, unhappy, negative, like find your most unhappy customers and talk to them as well. Try and get customers who have churned and talk to them, and try and get prospects that actually didn't end up going with your solution and talk to them as well. And identify what the problems that they're trying to solve are, what their workflows are. This is something that I don't see often enough, but can be really impactful, is really understanding, okay, here's the pain, problem, challenge. And then this is actually, the workflow in which we need to try and make this work. And by doing that, we start to diagnose, what our prospects and clients need based on an outcome, based on the value that they're trying to realize, as opposed to feature and functionality. So that's the thing that, I
Sure.
find sales, product, they always, everyone
Yep.
always goes to, well, what's the feature? What's the feature? No, 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 no. Take a step back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
what is the problem that we're trying to solve?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That's what we need to come back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're spot on because I'll take some we've managed a lot of product managers before in our lives, and when you think about the average product manager, and this is the standard thing that happens, there's a feature creep, and I'll
Yep.
dive into exactly what you're saying. Then, hey, I have X feature, I need X plus Y, and the roadmap gets translated in that feature creep, if that's the word to use. However, and to your point, exactly to your point, that we've got to think really beyond into what makes the customer satisfied, happy.
Hmm.
And if you have examples, I mean, we'd love to hear that. But that's exactly what we are after. I mean, true customer alignment or customer understanding is
Hmm.
what we're after.
Hmm.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, sort of continuing on that theme, it's actually fascinating to hear about your views on the product and customer success alignment and things like voice of customer, as you could sense from Arjun's take on it. We are both very passionate about, we've seen this in our past lives where feature creeps and product people just building a list of features because that's what they are a little distant from the customer. They are not necessarily that close
Hmm.
through voice of customer exercises, and it just creates a bloat. And then you always end up with this situation where you don't have enough investment to keep up with what the customers are asking for, versus if you really get focused through these exercises on what the customers really care about, you will create delight.
Yeah.
Uh, I wanted to go back to something that you said at the top about as these changes happen from customer success to now recurring revenue and sort of going into the profit center. And you were probably 5 years ahead of this. You got a lot of flack and hate mail probably as well about all
I
of
did.
this. So, what is your views after all this now in terms of customer success being a revenue center, profitability driver, how what the balance should be between sales, customer success, how should all this be ideally structured?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna say something that a lot of people make fun of consultants for saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is the structure depends. I think
Context matters. Context matters.
it does. Maybe that's what we should change it to is context matters. But no, truly, it really does. I'm gonna get a mug actually that says it depends on it. I think. I'm gonna go for it. But the context really does matter. And so, what I caution people around when they're looking for and trying to identify, okay, well, what is the structure for my go to market team? And that includes sales, any revenue generation, customer success, is to really take a step back and look at your go to market strategy and the customer journey and the customer experience. And the way, that I've always approached it is looking at what the go to market strategy is. And by strategy, I mean the set of choices that a company has made around their prioritization. And I want to be very distinct about that because oftentimes people will call their operational plan a
Hmm.
strategy.
Yep.
And I am getting to the answer to the question. But I think it's important to take a step back. And once you can identify, okay, and we're aligned on that strategy, and then you are mapping your operational plan. So like,
Hmm.
how do we actually bring this strategy to life? Then you can start mapping out the jobs to be done. Then look at it from a customer's perspective and think about, okay, from a customer experience standpoint, who does it make the most sense to interact with at certain stages? So, for
Hmm.
example, and I've been in this situation as a customer where I was working with a CSM and I needed to add user licenses to
Hmm.
the software that I was using. And they handed me back off to an AE who then had a
Mm.
discovery call with
Yep.
me,
Yep.
wanted to
Hmm.
do a demo. And it was just like, okay. And I was like, okay, I get it. You have your process that your
Hmm.
manager is telling you to follow, but literally all I need is two extra seats. Like, and the CSM could have done that. And yes, that's a commercial component for the CSM.
Hmm.
That the right thing to do by the customer in that situation is the CSM to just handle it You know,
Yep.
if it's expansion, cross-sell, completely new, different set of stakeholders, maybe it makes sense for the CSM, maybe it doesn't. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, when we take that view of, okay, this is what we need to drive towards as a business, this is
Hmm.
the experience and the value that the customer needs, then we can get to a mutually beneficial exchange between client and business and come to that answer as to who should own what. And now that's the long answer. The short answer for CS owning revenue, they should always, always, always have some tie to revenue. Otherwise, there's too many distractions. They won't get the proverbial seat at the table. Like CS
Hmm.
does have to, whether it's a churn rate, whether it's upsell, measuring on CSQLs, again, going back to what I just mentioned of how to actually decide
Hmm.
what those things are. I am very bullish about CS having some sort of revenue component.
Yeah.
And I guess you can say that now without the fear of getting all that hate mail versus 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, honestly, some of it was kind of nasty, but I got two apologies last week, actually.
Okay,
People reached out to me and was like, yeah, I wasn't very nice or diplomatic about it 5 years ago. Yeah, anyway.
And and I'll go back to your comment about it depends. I mean, I know you meant it in a joke, more out of humor rather than anything else. But I look at these large tech companies and how we look at them. If you look at Apple, Amazon, and Tesla, I mean, I'll just pick three because they happen to be the topic du jour these days. If you look at Apple, Apple's center point about customer success is the Apple Store or the App Store and their products, of course. I mean, their products delight customers, but that's beyond that. The Apple Store is a center point of their success, that they have the customer delight. If you look at Amazon, it's Prime, and Prime, how Prime kind of renders itself into the customer domain. If you look at Tesla, Tesla does nothing in terms of, and I'm hoping Elon Musk listens to this, but does nothing from a customer delight perspective. And they lead with product. And they say, hey, this is the brightest, shiniest toy that you can get. And this is how innovation happens. And you, Mr. Customer or Miss Customer, should be delighted by the product itself. So every company has a slightly different variation of how they see the customer interaction and customer delight happen, and they push on that, and then push that forward. Anyway, those were three large examples, but I'm sure there are much more relevant examples to bring to the table. But I'll just tie it off from your perspective. We love recommendations, thoughts. What makes good podcasts for you, or what makes good books, or something that you read in the recent past. What would you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so before I get to the recommendation, I just want to touch on what you just said about Amazon, Apple, and Tesla. So I'm a client of a customer of all three of those.
hmm. Hmm.
And the common thread across them all is that, well, there's two. They are extremely easy to do business with,
Hmm.
all three of them.
Amen.
Yep.
Honestly, this is what I ask all the time. Are you easy to do business with?
Yes.
Yep. Hmm.
Yes.
Like really ask yourself that and put yourself in your customer's shoes.
Hmm. Hmm.
We had in the time that we've had our Tesla, we've had one issue, knock on wood. We got a message on our app in the night before. Someone from Tesla came and picked our car up, drove it to their center, I believe in Mississauga, and dropped it off. And it was the most, and they said, "Do you need a car? We'll give you a car." And we were like, "Well, actually, we're driving to Nova Scotia tomorrow because that's where my family is. So we were planning a trip to visit my family." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, you can just take one of our cars if it's not ready in time for you to leave, and you'll get charging for free the whole way as well." And it was actually like a higher model car. And I was just like, the whole thing was
Hmm.
just, to
Yep.
me, I was like, wow, like, going back to delight, what a delight to deal with. So
Hmm.
easy, no stress, no. Anyway, we ended up getting our car back in time for our trip, but that is the thing. And their products are excellent.
Hmm.
In those organizations, the customer facing and the product, they have to be interfacing, they have to be working together.
I think
I
you're
won't contest
preaching to
it.
the choir.
I won't contest it as of now, but having been a Tesla customer for a long, long time, I agree with most of what you said. But we'll take it offline separately.
Well, I never said they were perfect, but anyway, yeah, conversation for another day. Um,
Another day.
yeah, but those are the two things that I find across all three of those businesses. Say what you will about different personalities and different aspects.
Mhm.
Sure.
Those are the
Yep.
core trends that I see. But going back to your question about podcasts and books, so I like to listen and to consume a variety of content. And what I recommend and encourage people to do is get outside of your domain.
Hmm.
So if you're a
Hmm.
sales executive, listen to product, customer success, marketing. If you're in
Hmm.
customer success, listen to sales,
Hmm.
listen to product. If you're in product, listen to, the go-to-market kickback,
Hmm.
the GTM kickback. Though, I find we often get into echo chambers. I talk about that sometimes
Sure.
as well. And
Yep.
it's really important to, keep honing in on your deep domain expertise.
Hmm.
But I really like the GTM Kickback as one of the podcasts because it does cover a breadth of different areas of business,
Hmm.
particularly across GTM, obviously, as per the name. The other one that I really like is 30 Minutes to President Club. Demand Gen is one of the co-hosts of that podcast, and I think it'd be really excellent for more CS folks to listen to that because I think just kind of giving that commercial lens is really important. And beyond that, a few people that I read and make sure try and catch most, if not all, of their content. Mark Stuse,
Hmm.
he's the CEO of Proof Analytics. His posts on LinkedIn are prolific and thought provoking. So
Hmm.
highly recommend following him. And he's coming out with a book in the spring, I believe, as well. So I'm eagerly awaiting for that. And no, he's not paying me for the
Perish the thought.
He's, and he's a really wonderful human being. But anyway, he's phenomenal. Dave Kellogg is another one. And
Uh-huh.
his podcast that he does with Ray Reich, that's another one to listen to. The SaaS CFO, that's another blog and
Hmm.
one to follow on LinkedIn to increase your financial acumen. So that's what I'd recommend.
That's
Fantastic.
wonderful, actually. I think to your point about doing cross-domain kind of listening, it's Arjun and I probably need to actually take some of your recommendations and broaden our go-to-market lens because we are otherwise we can be in our product echo chamber sometimes a little too much.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. One other thing that we typically like to talk to our guests. We are both huge sports enthusiasts. We like to talk to people about sports and lessons from sports that they can apply in business. One of the things that we talk about is business is nothing but a team sport.
Yeah.
We already talked about running, so I wouldn't necessarily go back into sports here. But one of the other things that we really we believe is core to what we are doing is this concept of adaptability. And you had recently shared a post about your journey back to the town that you grew up in and adaptability in that context. And this might bring up some Canada references for Arjun as well. So would like to hear your thoughts about adaptability, yes, that post as well as how that applies in business.
Yeah, I mean, if you look all around you and you'll find examples of, people, businesses, economies, countries, communities that have adapted and that haven't. And that post that you're referencing, where I grew up, a place called Cape Breton Island, which is near and dear to my heart. Has fallen on difficult economic times over the years, and there's a lot of brilliant people that live and work and have come from Cape Breton, but unfortunately the island didn't adapt quickly enough in ways, and that
Hmm.
always stuck with me, I think, and I think one of the reasons why I've always inherently looked for ways to stay relevant, to adapt, to make sure that, whether it's innovation or adapting to different financial circumstances, it's really important. And it's a timely question as well, because, if we look at, where we are today, and there's companies that are successfully navigating this most recent, macroeconomic environment and
Mm-hmm.
headwinds, and those that aren't. And if we look back in history, there's some examples that we can look to, that have successfully navigated. So one would be that comes to mind is SurveyMonkey. So SurveyMonkey did a really good job of weathering the 2008 Great Recession. They created the freemium model. I don't know if they're the first company that ever did freemium, but they really perfected it. And
Yep.
that's how they managed to survive and then thrive through that. Amazon, to bring them up again, is another one. In the 99 2000.com burst, they were close to going bankrupt, but through financial strategy, through convertible bonds, and then focusing on innovating different products like AWS, they were able
Mm-hmm.
to survive. So it's really important, and it goes back to one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about following out a product market fit. You have to diagnose your business, even if you made a mistake, even if it's really scary. You have to look at it head on in the face, or otherwise you'll miss your opportunity to innovate and adapt. And as much as it can be scary, to call out, oh, these are the wrong calls I made,
Mm-hmm.
the alternative to ignore it is even worse. It'll catch up to you eventually.
Before Gaurav closes it out, I'll leave you with a thought because Cape Breton brought up you talked about enterprises like SurveyMonkey and you talked about enterprises like Amazon, of course. But if you think about it from a macro sense, if you think about a Cape Breton kind of sense, two countries stand out. In the late 60s, I would say mid 60s, Singapore and Taiwan were really nowhere in the world spectrum, so to speak. And if you look at it today, 50 years or 70 years from where they were, they've evolved, they've adapted themselves to the environment from a financial services, from a chip development standpoint, and that adaptation is at a macro level. It is not just at an enterprise level. Now you're elevated this game to a much higher plane. And that's something that we need to think about, not just from an individual consumer lens to enterprise lens, but also at a macro lens, how that adaptation takes place across the journey. So, that's great. I mean, it's fantastic just to, you noodle my mind in terms of thinking about how that works. But yeah, Gaurav, take it away.
Yeah, yeah. No, this has been fascinating, Elizabeth. Thanks a lot for joining the podcast and for your views. It's great to kind of get this cross-functional kind of a discussion. We usually have
Sure.
chief product officers and people like that on our podcast. And for customer centricity, this discussion, I think, really underscores why it requires a village, a cross-functional team to go after customer centricity the right way. So thanks a lot for joining our podcast and sharing your views.
Thank you for